One punch. That's all it took for me to see my marriage clearly. My husband's fist connected with the left side of my face, and I fell. I looked in the mirror the next morning, and I saw bruises I couldn't cover. I saw a life I couldn't keep living. I saw a woman I didn't recognize anymore. But I also saw something else. I saw the moment everything changed. I didn't scream at him. I didn't cry. I didn't beg him to change or promise me it would never happen again. I did something that scared him far more than anger ever could. I got quiet. I got organized. I got gone. This is my story. My name is Jasmine. I met David at a work event 5 years ago. He was charming. He was handsome. He was everything I thought I wanted. He pursued me aggressively, not in a threatening way, just intensely. He wanted to spend all his time with me. He wanted to know everything about me. He wanted to be my whole world. I thought that was love. We moved in together after 6 months. He proposed after a year. I said yes without hesitation. He made me feel seen. He made me feel important. He made me feel like I was the center of his universe. But slowly, the intensity shifted. What felt like love started to feel like ownership. There were signs. God, there were so many signs. But I was too deep in it to see clearly. David didn't want me going out with my friends. David needed to know where I was every second. David called me constantly when I was at work. David got angry when I wore certain clothes. David said it was because he loved me. David said he was protecting me. My best friend, Maya, noticed first. Maya asked me why I wasn't coming to girls' nights anymore. Maya said I seemed different. Maya said David seemed controlling. I defended him. I defended David to my own best friend. David is just protective, I said. David loves me deeply. But late at night, when David thought I was sleeping, I'd hear David's voice, quiet, intense, possessive. David would say things like, "You're mine. You belong to me. No one else can have you." And I told myself that was love. That was devotion. That was what marriage was supposed to feel like. I was so wrong. The control escalated into anger. The anger escalated into verbal abuse. David would snap at me for small things. David would yell if dinner wasn't ready when he got home. David would accuse me of cheating if I talked to a male coworker. David would call me names when I disagreed with him. David said these things for my own good. I started walking on eggshells. I started trying to predict what would upset David. I started making myself smaller, quieter, less visible. I started thinking that if I just tried harder, if I was just better, if I just loved David enough, he would change. But abuse doesn't work that way. It escalates. One night, David accused me of being disrespectful. I don't even remember what I said, but David pushed me. David's hand was on my shoulder, and David shoved me hard enough that I fell into the wall. David looked shocked for a moment. Then David apologized profusely. David said it would never happen again. David said he was just stressed. David said I provoked him. David made me promise not to tell anyone. And I believed him. I actually believed that it was an accident, that David didn't mean to hurt me. I was so stupid. It happened on a Tuesday night. I can't remember what we were fighting about. It doesn't matter. Nothing I said justified what happened. We were in our bedroom. David was angry about something I'd done or said. I was trying to calm him down. I was using the techniques I'd learned. Don't raise your voice, don't argue back, just wait for him to calm down. But David wasn't calming down. David was escalating. "You don't respect me," David said. "You don't appreciate anything I do for you." "I do, David. I appreciate everything," I said quietly. "You're a liar," David said. "You're disrespectful. You need to learn." I didn't see it coming. I didn't have time to protect myself. David's fist came toward my face so fast. His fist connected with my left cheekbone and I fell. I hit the floor hard. For a moment, there was silence. David was standing over me, looking down at me on the ground. David's hand was still in a fist. And in that moment, I saw something I'd never seen before. David wasn't sorry. David looked satisfied. That's when I understood. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't the moment of weakness. This was who David was. This was what David was capable of. And this was going to happen again. I got up slowly. I went to the mirror, and I saw the bruises forming on my face, dark purple spreading across my cheekbone and jawline. I had to look away because I couldn't recognize myself. David spent the rest of the night apologizing. David cried. David said it was the worst mistake of his life. David said he didn't know what came over him. David begged me not to leave. Please, Jasmine, I love you. I didn't mean to. Please don't leave me. Please. I was numb. I felt nothing. I couldn't feel anything. The next morning, I looked at my face and I couldn't hide the bruises. I couldn't pretend they didn't exist. I couldn't lie about what happened. Maya called me. She'd been worried because I hadn't answered text. I told her I was sick. Maya didn't believe me. Maya asked me to send a photo. I almost hung up, but I sent her a picture of my face. Maya showed up at my house within the hour. When Maya saw the bruises in person, Maya didn't say anything. Maya just pulled me into a hug, and Maya held me while I finally cried. "We're getting you out of here," Maya said, "today." But I couldn't leave. Not yet. Because David wasn't the only one keeping me trapped. I was trapped by shame. I was trapped by the belief that maybe I deserved it. I was trapped by the fear of what David would do if I tried to leave. So I made excuses. I told Maya I needed time. I told my mother the bruises were from an accident. I told myself that maybe David was right. Maybe I did provoke him. 1 week after the bruises appeared, I stood in front of my mirror and I really looked at myself. Not at the bruises, but at the woman underneath them. I looked at a woman who had accepted less than she deserved. I looked at a woman who had made excuses for someone hurting her. I looked at a woman who was disappearing, and something inside me broke open, not with anger, not with rage, with clarity. I understood that this wasn't going to get better. David wasn't going to change. Love wasn't going to fix this. My efforts weren't going to matter. David had shown me exactly who he was, a man who would use his hands to hurt the woman he claimed to love. I understood that if I stayed, this would happen again. The bruises would fade, but the pattern wouldn't. David would apologize, but David would hurt me again, and maybe next time it would be worse. I understood that I had to choose myself, not because I was angry, but because I was worth choosing. That morning, I made a plan. I didn't tell David. I didn't warn him. I didn't give him a chance to stop me or manipulate me or convince me to stay. I just got quiet and I got organized. I didn't go to David with anger. I didn't scream at him or fight with him or try to make him understand what he'd done. I did something far more effective. I documented everything. I took photos of the bruises. I wrote down the dates of every incident. I recorded David's voice when he was angry, saying things that showed his patterns of abuse. I called a domestic violence hotline. The counselor on the other end helped me make a safety plan. We talked about the signs that David was escalating. We talked about the danger of leaving. We talked about how abusers often become most dangerous when their victim tries to escape. I opened a bank account that David didn't know about. Every day, I transferred small amounts of money that he wouldn't notice. I gathered important documents, my birth certificate, my social security card, financial records. I researched lawyers. I found one who specialized in domestic abuse cases. I had a consultation over the phone while David was at work. The lawyer told me that the bruises, the documentation, the pattern of control, it would be enough. I contacted a domestic violence shelter and made a plan for where I would go. I packed a bag with essentials and hid it at Maya's house. I told my mother what was happening, and my mother helped me. I was calculating. I was strategic. I was not emotional. I was a woman with a plan to save her own life, and David had no idea. I left on a Thursday morning. David had gone to work. I'd planned it carefully. I called Maya and told her it was time. Maya picked me up within 30 minutes. I took one bag with essentials. I took the documentation I'd gathered. I took the proof of abuse. I left everything else. As we were pulling away, David called. He'd gotten a notification from our bank. I'd transferred most of my money. David called me over and over. I didn't answer. That afternoon, I filed a protective order. I gave the photographs of the bruises to the lawyer. I gave the documentation to law enforcement. I stayed at the domestic violence shelter for 2 weeks while the protective order was being processed. David tried everything. David showed up at Maya's house. David called my phone hundreds of times. David sent messages saying he'd changed, he'd get help, he'd never hurt me again. David threatened to hurt himself if I didn't come back. I didn't listen. I didn't respond. I stayed quiet and I stayed focused on leaving. When David violated the protective order and came to the shelter location, he was arrested. The police took him away, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt safe. Not because the danger was completely gone, but because I had done the most powerful thing a woman in an abusive relationship can do. I had chosen myself. I had refused to be a victim anymore. Healing wasn't about forgiveness. Healing was about reclamation. I started therapy. I worked with a trauma counselor who specialized in domestic abuse. We talked about the patterns I'd accepted. We talked about why I'd stayed as long as I did. We talked about how abuse breaks your sense of reality and how recovery means rebuilding trust in yourself. I took a self-defense class, not because I was afraid of David anymore, but because learning to fight back, literally and figuratively, helped me reclaim my body as my own. I surrounded myself with people who supported me. Maya was there every step. My mother checked on me constantly. I made new friends who had no idea about my past. I built a life that wasn't defined by what David had done to me. I started to sleep again. The nightmares faded. The hypervigilance, always listening for David, always afraid, slowly released its grip. I learned that healing isn't about erasing what happened. It's about integrating it into your story as something you survived, not something that defines you. I learned that I had been strong all along. I just hadn't recognized it until I had to use that strength to save my own life. The bruises faded, my confidence returned, and slowly, month by month, year by year, I became someone who could talk about this without falling apart. I became a survivor. 2 years after I left David, I ran into him at a grocery store. He looked different. He looked haunted. He tried to approach me and say hello. I nodded politely and walked away. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. I felt nothing for him at all. That's when I knew I was truly free. Because freedom isn't about rage or revenge. Freedom is about indifference. Freedom is when your abuser becomes so irrelevant to your life that you can acknowledge their existence without it affecting you. I built a life that belongs entirely to me. I decorated my own home the way I wanted. I made decisions without checking with anyone. I went where I wanted, wore what I wanted, said what I wanted. I had the freedom to be fully myself. I started sharing my story, not because I wanted attention, but because I realized that other women needed to know they could escape too. That abuse isn't love, that control isn't devotion, that bruises aren't signs of passion. I learned that the real power I had wasn't in fighting back against David. It was in walking away and never looking back. It was in choosing myself every single day. It was in rebuilding a life that was worth living. And now, when young women ask me about relationships, about red flags, about that feeling when something isn't right, I tell them the truth. Love should not hurt. A partner should not make you afraid. And if someone hits you,